On an early morning flight from New York to San Francisco, a black woman boarded the first-class flight with a ticket booked 3 months in advance. She was as quiet, polite, and confident as any other passenger. But within minutes, all eyes in the cabin were on her, not because she was famous, but because someone thought she didn't belong. A flight attendant asked to check her ticket. A captain came over to verify her identity. And then, amid the cold stares of those around her, she was ushered off the plane. Seat 2A, the one she had paid for in full, was immediately given to a smiling white man. Unbeknownst to anyone, that woman was Ariana Cole, CEO of a leading technology corporation in the United States. And just 30 minutes after being humiliated, she was the one who signed the decision that caused the entire crew to lose their jobs. But this story is not about revenge. It is about how true justice takes flight, not through anger, but through wisdom and dignity. So, what happened between the moment she left first class and the moment the entire airline was brought to its knees? The answer will make you think about how justice works in the modern world. If you believe that true strength comes from calmness, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to join me in the story. Black woman denied first-class seat 30 minutes later. She fired the entire crew. The boarding gate at Terminal D buzzed with the quiet impatience of business travelers, people who lived between time zones. Their eyes trained to read flight boards the way gamblers read cards. Ariana Cole stood among them, silent, composed. The kind of silence that made people look twice without knowing why. She wore a navy suit, clean lines, no jewelry except a small silver watch. Her carry-on was light, efficient, and marked discreetly with the Nova Shield logo, a name that turned heads in the cybersecurity world, but not here. Not in this space where labels like first class meant more than CEO. When the attendant at the counter scanned her ticket, the screen blinked. Seat 2A, Ariana said, with the calm certainty of someone who'd planned ahead. The attendant smiled mechanically. Of course, Miss Cole. Enjoy your flight. Inside the aircraft, the air was cooler, filtered through the scent of leather and entitlement. The curtain between first class and economy hung like a line between two versions of the world. Ariana walked down the short aisle, found her seat, and placed her bag neatly under the front compartment. The man across the aisle looked up from his tablet, nodded briefly. That was all. Then Lydia Moss appeared. The flight attendant's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Her blonde hair was tied into a perfect knot, and her voice carried that tone sweetened for the white men in suits, brittle for everyone else. "Excuse me, ma'am," Lydia said, holding a printed manifest. "I just need to check your boarding pass again." Ariana handed it over without question. Lydia frowned, then forced a laugh that wasn't one. "Oh, this says first class. That's interesting." The words interesting and ma'am were the oldest tricks in passive hostility. Ariana knew both. "It should," she replied, evenly. "It was booked 3 months ago." Lydia nodded, but her eyes didn't match her tone. "Of course. It's just, sometimes we get system errors." She turned, whispered to another attendant. Their glances flicked toward Ariana, then back to the manifest. In the small, curated silence of first class, whispers travel like smoke. Ariana waited. She had built companies from chaos. Waiting was easy. Then Lydia returned this time with the captain. His name tag read Doyle, the kind of man who walked as if the aircraft belonged to him. "Ma'am," he began, We're just trying to make sure everything checks out. Could you tell me where this ticket was purchased through the company's corporate account? Ariana said. Nova Shield Incorporated. Doyle's brows lifted. Never heard of it. That's all right, she said. Most people have never heard of the company protecting their passwords either. He didn't smile. Lydia stood beside him, arms folded, as if Ariana were on trial for trespassing into someone else's comfort. Passengers pretended not to watch, but their eyes lingered over their screens. Some raised their eyebrows, others smirked. In the hierarchy of travel, silence can be a verdict. Then Lydia spoke again. We've had issues lately with fraudulent upgrades. I'm sure you understand it's our job to protect our premium clients. The implication hung heavy. Ariana looked at her, then at the captain. Are you suggesting this ticket is fake, I'm saying? Doyle replied carefully. We need to verify it. I see. Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind that made people nervous. I'll wait right here. Then... But she didn't wait long. 2 airport security officers appeared summoned quietly, as if handling a disturbance. The passengers shifted in their seats. Lydia crossed her arms tighter. Ma'am, one officer said, we're going to need you to come with us while we sort this out. Ariana turned to Lydia. So, I'm being removed from a seat I paid for. It's just procedure, Lydia said. You can reboard once it's cleared. Procedure. The word used to make cruelty sound organized. Ariana stood. She adjusted her blazer, picked up her carry-on, and walked down the aisle without saying another word. I could have argued, she would later think, but some fights are designed to make you look small, no matter how tall you stand. As she reached the gate, the hum of passengers behind her filled the cabin again. A man's voice laughed softly low, dismissive. When she glanced back, she saw him white, mid-40s, wearing a navy tie and entitlement like cologne slipping into her seat. 2A. Lydia handed him a drink before the door even closed. Outside the aircraft, the fluorescent lights hummed. The security officers offered clipped apologies. It's probably a mix-up. One muttered, these things happen. Ariana nodded once. They do, she said, but they shouldn't. She walked away, no anger, no scene, just that kind of silence that feels heavier than shouting. People often mistake silence for surrender. It isn't. It's the space where storms gather. At the coffee kiosk near Gate D14, she opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered for a moment before she typed an email to her assistant, cancel the 4 p.m. meeting. Tell legal, I'll need a full dossier on Ariane Air, ownership, debt, regulatory filings, everything. She closed the laptop and sat back. The reflection on the glass showed a woman too calm for what had just happened. In her mind, the humiliation replayed not as pain, but as data. Every word, every smirk, every procedure became a pattern to decode. They think I don't belong in that seat, she thought. They have no idea I build the systems that decide who gets to sit there in the first place. The loudspeaker announced Flight Orion 2891 to San Francisco now departing. Through the window, she watched the plane taxi away her plane. Her seat, her dignity briefly stolen. Then she smiled, just slightly, because Ariana Cole understood something most people didn't. Humiliation was temporary, but records were permanent, and the world ran on records. Somewhere above the clouds, Lydia Moss was pouring champagne for a man sitting where Ariana had been meant to sit. She probably believed the moment had passed, that the problem had been removed. But justice, when it comes, never knocks twice, it flies. When Flight Orion 2891 reached cruising altitude, most passengers leaned back into the quiet luxury that came with the ticket price. Champagne, screens, small talk about quarterly earnings. But one man wasn't watching movies. He was reviewing footage. Ethan Ward sat in seat 3C, behind the aisle where everything had happened 30 minutes earlier. His camera lens had followed every frame of Ariana Cole's removal, the calm way she stood, the disbelief in her eyes, the cold precision of Lydia Moss's voice. He hadn't planned to record anything that morning, but something about the tone, the assumption that a black woman didn't belong in first class hit a nerve he hadn't known was still raw. Ethan had a daughter, 9 years old, brown skin and big eyes that always looked for fairness. He'd promised himself she would grow up in a world kinder than the one that raised him. Now, watching the clip again under the cabin's dim lights, he realized how naive that promise was. The footage wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no resistance, just Ariana being escorted off with quiet grace, her expression unreadable. Yet the silence in the video was the loudest thing about it. They took her seat because they could. That's what he thought as the plane hummed above the clouds. He opened his phone, typed a caption that didn't need editing racism at 30,000 feet. Watch how dignity looks when the system tries to erase it. Then he hit post. By the time the plane landed in San Francisco, his phone was shaken with notifications, 2,000 views, then 20, then 2 million. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire through timelines and talk shows. The hashtag Boycott Orion Air surged to the top of every platform. News anchors replayed the moment Ariana was asked to step aside while a white passenger filled her seat. Commentators dissected every frame, the facial expressions, the subtle smirks, the phrasing of just procedure. People recognized the choreography of discrimination, the politeness weaponized, the authority unquestioned. For many, it was just another example. For others, it was personal. The first major headline appeared on the Globe Tribune, a black CEO removed from first class. Orion Air calls it a verification error. The statement from Orion Air was brief, corporate, and bloodless. We regret an unfortunate procedural misunderstanding and are reviewing internal protocols. No apology, no name, no responsibility. That was the moment the internet turned. Within 12 hours, the company's official account had locked its replies. Stock hashtags trended alongside public outrage. Pilots, attendants, passengers began sharing their own experiences, some quiet, some furious. Ethan's inbox filled with messages, journalists asking for interviews, strangers thanking him, trolls accusing him of fabricating outrage. He didn't respond to most of them. He wasn't trying to start a war. He had just recorded what he saw. And yet, wars have started over less. Across the city. Ariana sat in her office, the shades half drawn against the glow of early morning. Her assistant, nervous, hovered by the door. "Ma'am, you should see this," she said, holding up her phone. The video played, her removal, the whispers, the smirk of the man in seat 2A. Ariana watched without a word. The video ended with her walking away, head high. She didn't flinch, she just exhaled, slowly. Then she said, "So, that's how the world found out." Her assistant hesitated. "Do you want to issue a statement?" "No." Her eyes stayed on the screen. "Let them talk. The truth doesn't need my commentary." The next morning, Orion Air's CEO, Richard Westvale III, appeared on television calm, confident, rehearsed. He smiled with the kind of assurance that came from generational privilege. At Orion, we treat all our passengers equally. He said, this was a system mix-up, nothing more. We're deeply sorry for any inconvenience. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Every word he avoided said more than the ones he spoke. Meanwhile, on a late-night show, a host replayed the clip with biting commentary. If this is what equality looks like at 30,000 feet, maybe we should start walking. The audience laughed, then fell silent, because under the humor there was a discomfort everyone recognized. In online forums, someone discovered who Ariana Cole really was, the CEO of NovaShield, one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity companies in America. Articles began connecting dots: her influence in government contracts, her presence in high-level tech summits. Suddenly, she wasn't just a victim, she was a symbol. A journalist tweeted they didn't just kick off a passenger, they kicked off the woman who protects half the Fortune 500 from cyber threats. The tweet hit 1.2 million likes. Orion Air's stock dropped 3% by noon. Ethan watched all this unfold from his apartment window, the city glowing like circuitry below him. He'd spent years investing in startups, believing technology could solve human bias. Now he realized technology only amplifies what people refuse to face. I didn't expect it to matter this much, he thought. I just wanted people to see. But seeing was no longer passive. It was an act of judgment. A day later, he received a message from an unknown contact, Ariana Cole, Mr. Ward. I believe we were on the same flight. Thank you for recording what others chose to ignore. He hesitated before replying. You shouldn't have had to go through that. The video's everywhere now. Ariana good, let it breathe. The truth needs oxygen. He stared at her words for a long time. There was no anger in them, no demand, just a clarity that felt heavier than outrage. He didn't know it yet, but that message would mark the beginning of something far bigger than a viral post. By the week's end, Orion Air's PR team released a second statement, longer, still hollow. We value diversity and are committed to inclusion training for all employees. The phrase diversity and inclusion training trended for an hour, then drowned in memes and criticism. People weren't angry about a single seat. They were angry about the architecture of power that decided who belonged in that seat. And, as the world debated, Ariana remained silent. She didn't post, didn't appear on camera. She worked, quietly, methodically. When asked later why she hadn't spoken out that week, she would say, I didn't need to. The world was already speaking louder than I ever could. That was the brilliance of restraint when silence itself becomes a strategy. Because while the internet raged, Ariana's team began mapping Orion Air's financial web ownership chains, debt structures, board alliances. Every click, every share, every angry hashtag pushed the company closer to scrutiny, and Ariana knew exactly what to do with that. But that would come later. For now, in the quiet after the storm, a man and a woman who had never met before shared an unspoken understanding. Some battles aren't fought in courtrooms or boardrooms. They start in silence and end when the world finally hears what silence sounds like. A week had passed since Flight Orion 2891. The noise had spread, then softened, then found its rhythm in the endless loop of online outrage. But inside the penthouse office of NovaShield, there was no noise at all, only precision. Ariana Cole sat before a screen that covered half the wall. Rows of data moved like tides ownership charts, debt ratios, corporate hierarchies rendered in quiet blue light. Her assistant, Camille, entered with 2 cups of coffee. "It's still trending," she said softly. "Over 40 million views now." Ariana didn't look up. Good. Noise keeps them busy. Camille hesitated. "Should we prepare a press statement, a lawsuit maybe? People expect no." Ariana interrupted, her tone not sharp, but final. "They expect anger. Let them. I'm not giving them predictability." The cursor blinked at the top of the screen beside a name, Orion Air, Ownership Overview. A series of lines extended downward to a holding company, Westvale Holdings, and beneath that, a web of subsidiaries like roots of an old, dying tree. Ariana zoomed in. She saw what she needed to see: debt maturity schedules, refinancing delays, pending regulatory filings, a slow bleed hidden behind glossy investor presentations. She leaned back. "So," she said quietly, "the empire's already cracked." Camille blinked. Ma'am Ariana turned her chair. "Westvale Holdings. They're running out of liquidity. 2 quarters, maybe 3. Orion's just one of their trophies." Camille frowned. "Are you saying we're going after them?" Ariana smiled faintly. "Not amusement, but purpose. I'm saying they took something that wasn't theirs to take, and I prefer to recover value the same way they stole it legally, publicly, efficiently." She tapped the desk twice, a subtle rhythm she always used when a decision had already been made. That evening, the boardroom of Nova Shield filled with its senior team. Screens glowed, graphs lined the walls. The meeting was unannounced, the kind of gathering that told everyone something monumental was coming. Ariana entered last. She didn't speak immediately. She placed her laptop on the table, clicked once, and the Orion corporate tree appeared behind her. "You've all seen the video," she said. "You've read the statements. You know how they framed it a procedural error." Her tone was steady, almost conversational. "I've spent my career protecting systems from breaches. But this time, the breach was moral. No one moved," she continued. "Orion Air is owned by Westvale Holdings. They're leveraged to the bone. Their lenders are jittery. Their market value is declining." A pause. "They took my seat, so I'll buy their plane." The room was silent. Then someone exhaled, not laughter, not disbelief, just awe. One of the executives, Grant, cleared his throat. "You mean an acquisition?" Ariana's eyes held his. "Eventually, but not directly, not yet. First, we accumulate quietly. Through proxies, through funds, through partnerships. We acquire control before they know they've lost it." Grant nodded slowly. "Operation name." She looked at the screen, at the lines connecting one corporation to another. Fragile as spider silk. "Project Flight Path," she said. That night, long after the board had left, Ariana remained in the darkened office. Below her, the city shimmered lights tracing the outlines of ambition. She stared out for a long time, the reflection of data faintly mirrored in the glass beside her face. They think silence means surrender. It doesn't. It means calculation. She remembered the captain's condescension, the flight attendant's tone, the way the man in 2A never questioned the seat that wasn't his. The memory didn't hurt anymore. It instructed on her desk. The first document of Project Flight Path weighted a 1-page summary outlining target percentages, time frames, and proxy entities. At the bottom, she'd written a single note in pen win without noise. By the end of the second week, Her strategy team had mapped out the vulnerabilities. Orion's short-term debt rollover with 3 investment banks. Westvale's exposure to declining commercial real estate. The fact that half their board members were over-leveraged in personal holdings. It wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Camille watched Ariana move through data like a surgeon through an operation precise, unsentimental. "Ma'am," she said one evening, "you could sue. It would be faster." Ariana looked up from her tablet. And what would that give me? A settlement check, an apology no one means. She shook her head. Justice isn't when they pay. Justice is when they have to change. At home. The world outside still buzzed with hashtags and headlines. News anchors debated whether race had anything to do with the incident. Some said yes, some said maybe, others said it's complicated. Ariana didn't watch. She had no interest in noise that produced no motion. Her home office was minimal glass desk, a single photo of her mother on the shelf, a woman who'd cleaned houses so Ariana could go to MIT. Her mother used to say, "Don't shout back at fools. Make them irrelevant." That voice returned now, soft but firm in her mind. Late one night, Ethan Ward called. He'd kept his distance since their brief message exchange, but curiosity had drawn him back. "I've been following the numbers," he said. "Westvale's bleeding out." "Are you involved?" Ariana didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, deliberate. Then she said, "I don't retaliate. Mr. Ward, I restructure." Ethan chuckled softly. "You sound like you're planning something big." "I'm planning balance," she said. "They mistook embarrassment for weakness. That's the oldest mistake in power." He paused, then said quietly, "Whatever you're doing, I'd like to help." She didn't respond, but he heard a faint sound, the click of a pen, the start of a new note being written. Days turned into a disciplined rhythm, markets, meetings, monitoring. Every morning began at 5:30 with a run. Every evening ended with data. There was a serenity to it, the peace of someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Inside Nova Shield's secure financial terminal, the first shares of Orion Air began transferring quietly through intermediaries. Nothing public, nothing traceable, just movement small, deliberate, unstoppable. On the 15th night, Ariana stood again by the window, city lights flickering below. Camille had left. The office was empty. A news anchor's voice drifted faintly from the TV in the corner. Orion Air faces mounting pressure as investors question its diversity policies and transparency. CEO Richard Westvale insists the company's fundamentals remain strong. Ariana turned off the TV. The silence that followed felt pure. She whispered to herself, almost a prayer. Let them believe they're steady. Balance is easiest to tip when it looks certain. In the weeks to come, the world would call it strategy. Some would call it revenge. But in truth, it was neither. It was restoration. Because when someone takes your seat and the world watches you, don't fight for the chair. You build the airline. By the 3rd week after the incident, the storm on social media had begun to fade as storms always do. But inside Nova Shield's private strategy suite, something else was forming precision disguised as calm. Ariana Cole moved through the numbers like a conductor through a quiet symphony. Rows of financial data lined the monitors, debt maturities, bond yields, lender covenants, all converging toward one truth. Orion Air was running out of air. Her financial director, Lewis Grant, stood beside her, cautious but curious. They've got 3 short-term loans rolling over next quarter, he said, all tied to variable interest. If the Fed moves again, they'll be squeezed. Ariana nodded. Which means desperation, she said. Desperation breeds deals. Grant scrolled through the data. Their cash flow's thin. Westvale Holdings can't bail them out without breaching their own credit lines. But even then, we'd need a window something public. There will be one, Ariana replied. Panic always leaks before paperwork does. She zoomed in on a single spreadsheet line labeled Orion Air, institutional shareholders. Her eyes flicked to the percentage columns. 30 days, she murmured. That's how long we'll need. Grant looked at her. 30 days for what to own them, she said. The next morning, Ariana convened the board in Nova Shield's glass-walled conference room. The city glowed beneath them, a lattice of light and ambition. When she entered, everyone stood a little straighter. She didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. Let's begin, she said, setting a tablet on the table. Orion Air is vulnerable. I intend to turn that vulnerability into value. She tapped the screen once. The Orion financials appeared behind her, a simple, brutal truth rendered in numbers. They took a seat from me. She began. But what they didn't realize was that they also exposed their own weakness. Pride is expensive when you're broke. The executives exchanged glances. Some looked uneasy, others intrigued. This isn't about revenge, she continued. Calm, but absolute. This is about opportunity. Orion Air represents everything wrong with modern power: arrogant, inefficient, complacent, and because of that, it's for sale. They just don't know it yet. Grant cleared his throat. Are we filing a lawsuit? Or Ariana smiled slightly. No, this isn't a court case. It's a market play. And I don't sue incompetence. I acquire it. The line landed like a pin drop in still water. By evening, the codename Project Flight Path became operational. Its purpose: accumulate 20% of Orion's publicly traded shares through quiet, invisible channels, investment shells, hold'em partnerships, private equity fronts. The rules were simple. No direct links to Nova Shield, no press leaks. No movement large enough to trigger market alerts. Every acquisition would look like coincidence. In a secured room 1 floor below, Ariana watched as the first trades went through. The progress bar blinked quietly, unremarkable to the outside world. Monumental to her. They think they embarrassed me, she thought. They just gave me their balance sheet. Her assistant, Camille, entered with a folder. These are the shell corporations you approved: Valkyrie Capital, Orion Nexus, Meridian Equity. Ariana flipped through the papers. Diversify the volume, she said. Small blocks, spread across 3 jurisdictions. If anyone connects the dots, they'll be too late to stop it. Camille nodded, still slightly in awe. You're buying an airline. Ariana smiled faintly. No, I'm buying the illusion that power can't be taken back. 2 weeks later, the first tremors began. Financial journalists started whispering about unusual trading activity in Orion stock. Analysts speculated that a foreign investor might be positioning for takeover. Meanwhile, inside Westvale Holdings, board members grew restless, their liquidity running thinner by the day. But Ariana stayed invisible. Her moves were quiet, methodical, cloaked beneath layers of legal normalcy. Grant briefed her daily. We've crossed 9% through proxies. Average price below market. Momentum looks good. Keep going, she said. Don't chase speed, chase silence. At home, she worked under lamplight, her reflection merging with the data on her screen. She thought of that morning on the plane, Lydia's careful smile, the captain's skepticism, the man in 2A sipping champagne like ownership was oxygen. The memory no longer stung. It focused. Some people build walls of privilege, she thought. Others build ladders out of humiliation. She preferred ladders. Meanwhile, Orion Air continued to unravel. Their customer satisfaction scores plummeted after the scandal. Partnerships hesitated. And though their PR team had scrubbed every mention of the incident, the internet has a long memory and a short tolerance. Ethan Ward watched the decline from his own office. He wasn't directly involved yet. Not officially, but he kept a quiet line of communication open with Ariana. Every few days, a short, encrypted message arrived from her progress reports disguised as market updates. He admired her restraint. Most people would have gone on talk shows or hired lawyers. Ariana built empires instead. In the third week of accumulation, Grant entered Ariana's office with a cautious smile. We're at 16%. By Friday, we'll hit 20. Ariana closed the file she'd been reviewing. Good. That's the threshold we need for influence. What happens after that? He asked. She stood and walked to the window. Below her, the skyline shimmered like circuitry. After that, she said, we stop reacting to their mistakes and start designing them. Later that night, she drafted a memo to her team to Executive Strategy Division Subject Flight Path Phase D. We're not just acquiring shares, we're acquiring leverage. Let the market believe we're investors. We are, in truth, architects. A. C. When she sent it, she sat back and looked at the city again. The same world that once questioned her right to sit in a chair was now unknowingly selling her the company that owned it. It was not rage that moved her forward. It was mathematics. By the end of the 30 days, the numbers spoke for themselves. Nova Shield's shell entities held 20.3% of Arion's voting shares, a minority stake, technically, but in a fractured, debt-stricken company it was dominance. And Ariana Cole, the woman escorted off a plane for daring to sit where she belonged, now owned 1/5 of the airline's destiny. When Grant congratulated her, she only said, "Don't thank me yet. Justice isn't the purchase. It's the redesign." Then she smiled. The kind of smile that holds no joy, only clarity. You don't yell at the system, she thought. You rewire it. The winter air over San Francisco carried that dry sharpness of late February, the kind that made glass towers gleam brighter than they should. In the upper floors of Nova Shield's headquarters, Ariana Cole watched the fog roll in from the bay, blurring the skyline like a slow erasure. Her assistant entered quietly. "There's someone here to see you." "Ma'am," Camille said. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." Ariana didn't look up from her screen. "Name Ethan Ward." Ariana's fingers paused mid-typing. She remembered the man from Flight 2891, the quiet passenger who had recorded everything. Then changed the conversation of an entire country. "Send him in," she said. Ethan stepped into the office, his presence calm but heavy, the way a storm feels before it breaks. He was dressed in a dark coat, no tie, eyes carrying the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from too much clarity. "I wasn't sure you'd see me," he said. "I owe you that much," Ariana replied. "You filmed what most people would have ignored." She gestured to a seat. "What brings you here, Mr. Ward, he sat down, hands clasped loosely. I'm here because what happened to you wasn't the first time. Ariana tilted her head slightly. Go on. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. No corporate seal, no preamble, just a collection of documents, printed screenshots, internal emails, and reports. My daughter, he began, his voice steady but restrained, was 12 when it happened. Mixed race. Her mother's white. We were flying to Boston. She was wearing leggings and a hoodie, the same outfit a dozen other kids wore that day. But the gate agent told her she couldn't board first class, said her clothes didn't meet presentation standards. A silence hung between them. Heavy, but unforced. She cried in the terminal. He said, they never apologized. I let it go then, because I thought it was an isolated mistake. But it wasn't. He opened the folder. I've been collecting these for 3 years. Employees, passengers, contractors, all people of color, all with similar stories. Same company, same language, presentation standards. Maintain an atmosphere. It's systemic. Ariana flipped through the papers. Photos, testimonials, complaint forms that went nowhere. Every page was another quiet injustice small enough to deny, large enough to define a culture. She closed the folder gently. Why bring this to me? Because you're not just a name on a headline, Ethan said. You're someone who understands systems, how to break them from the inside. He hesitated, then added, and because I have capital, a lot of it, enough to make a dent. Ariana looked at him, studying his posture, the tension around his jaw. You want to invest, she said flatly. I want a partner, he corrected. You lead, I follow. You've already started something bigger than you realize, and I'm done filming from the sidelines. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted toward the window, the fog now swallowing the city, only faint lights piercing through. Every alliance begins with an injury, she thought. The trick is choosing which ones to heal together. The next morning, Ethan returned not as a visitor, but as a participant. They met in the lower conference suite, the one Nova Shield used for projects that weren't yet meant to exist. The table was bare except for 2 cups of black coffee and a single folder labeled Project Flight Path, Phase 2. Ariana began, We're already holding 20.3% of Orion's shares, but to tip control, we'll need strategic allies investors with credibility and reach. Ethan nodded. That's where I come in. He placed a USB drive on the table. Here's what I've gathered. Internal memos from former Orion HR staff, flight crew testimonies, passengers' reports. It's a pattern, racial bias coded as customer experience. You can't litigate culture, but you can bankrupt it. Ariana leaned forward slightly. You've done your homework. Personal reasons, he said simply. After what they did to my daughter, I promised myself I'd find a way to make them see what they refused to see. Ariana studied him for a moment. And what do you want in return? 1 seat, he said. When this is done, when Orion's leadership falls, I want 1 seat on the board. Not for power, for memory. So they never forget why this happened. Ariana regarded him quietly, the kind of look that stripped away pretense. Finally, she nodded. Deal. They shook hands. No lawyers, no contracts, just 2 people bound by something sharper than ink purpose. As the days passed, their alliance grew in quiet momentum. Ethan's connections in the tech investment world opened doors Ariana's team couldn't. He funneled capital through secondary funds, masking their moves under the guise of emerging transport innovation. Meanwhile, Nova Shield's analysts integrated his dossier into their strategic files, every incident mapped, cross-referenced, categorized. Together, they were building not just an acquisition plan, but a narrative. Orion Air would fall not through scandal, but through exposure, not by court order, but by collapse. Late one evening, as the office emptied, Ethan and Ariana remained behind, reviewing the projection models. On the screen, a timeline glowed, projected control window 90 days. Ethan exhaled. 3 months, he said. You think we can pull it off? Ariana looked at the numbers, her reflection overlapping the graphs. We don't need to pull it off, she said softly. We just need them to underestimate us long enough. He smiled faintly. You really don't do anger, do you? She shook her head. Anger burns fast, strategy burns slow, and slow fire always wins. Later, when Ethan left, Ariana remained by the window again. Same view, same city, but something different in the air. Partnership, she realized, was another form of justice. When done right, it wasn't about trust, it was about alignment. He carries grief, she thought. I carry precision. Together, that's enough fuel to fly. By the end of March, the alliance was formalized discreetly, off the record, sealed in a private trust. Ethan's capital expanded their holdings to 28%, enough to demand board visibility, enough to make Ariane nervous. When Grant received the internal update, he glanced at Ariana. We're exposed now. If they trace this, they won't, Ariana said calmly, because they still believe they're too powerful to be replaced. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, that's how all empires die, one assumption at a time. 2 weeks later, Ethan received an encrypted message from Ariana's office from a C. Subject confirmation. Welcome to the boardroom, Mr. Ward. He stared at the message for a long time before smiling. Not the smile of victory, but of recognition. The kind that comes when you realize justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a quiet suit and walks through the front door. By April, the silence between Nova Shield and Westvale Holdings had become its own form of tension. Publicly, nothing seemed unusual, a quiet quarter, the kind the financial press forgets about. Privately, the numbers told a different story. Orion's shares were moving, steadily, invisibly, toward someone who wasn't supposed to own them. When the letter arrived, it came the old-fashioned way, couriered, embossed, and hand-delivered. The envelope bore the Westvale Holdings crest, a silver W stamped over navy blue, the kind of arrogance that still believed weight equaled power. Camille placed it on Ariana's desk. From their legal division, she said softly, marked confidential. Ariana read it once, then again, slower. The language was deliberate, crafted to sound polite while promising ruin. If you do not cease your ongoing acquisition activity and the dissemination of market rumors, we will pursue immediate litigation for defamation, market manipulation, and unlawful interference with corporate operations. We urge you to avoid further damage to your professional reputation. It was signed by Thomas Gale, Chief Counsel for Westvale Holdings, and carbon copied to 3 regulatory offices, a silent threat disguised as procedure. Ariana placed the letter down. So they've noticed, she said quietly. Grant, standing near the window, crossed his arms. They think they can intimidate you. They don't need to think, she replied. They're trained to. She leaned back, eyes half closed, calculating. The letter wasn't an obstacle, it was confirmation. Westvale was nervous enough to blink first. That evening, the Nova Shield war room filled again, soft lights, long shadows, the hum of data streams like quiet thunder. Ethan Ward, joined by video from New York, his face illuminated by the cold glow of a laptop. Ariana began without preamble. Westvale sent a warning. They've accused us of market manipulation. Ethan smirked. That's rich. The same people who've been manipulating image and access for decades, Grant exhaled. Do we respond legally? Ariana shook her head. No. We respond logically. She turned to the screen behind her. A spreadsheet flickered to lifelines of internal Arion training data, whistleblower reports, archived emails Ethan had provided weeks ago. Among them, phrases like maintain elite atmosphere, avoid aesthetic inconsistency, and customer comfort standards by appearance. The words didn't need translation. They were coded prejudice, written into corporate policy. They've built their house on this, Ariana said. Let's show the world the foundation. Ethan's voice came through, low and certain. You're going public. Not everything, she said, just enough. The next morning, 2 journalists from the Financial Herald received an anonymous tip, a set of internal training slides from Arion Air. The leak was surgical, no personal names, no classified data, only what mattered proof of systematic discrimination hidden under the language of Brandon. Within hours, the story broke online. Exclusive Arion Air's elite standards. May mask racial bias. Leaked documents. Suggest, by noon, major outlets had picked it up. By evening, talk shows were dissecting every word of the slides. By midnight, Orion bias trended above politics, sports, and celebrity scandals combined. Orion's PR team released a statement denying everything. These materials are outdated drafts not reflective of our current training practices. But denials don't travel as fast as outrage. 48 hours later, Orion's stock dropped 18%. Analysts called it market overreaction. Investors called it a wake-up call. Inside Westvale Holdings, calls from lenders flooded in. One bank requested early repayment. Another froze a pending credit line. The empire was bleeding liquidity, exactly as Ariana had predicted. At Nova Shield, the trading screens glowed with slow satisfaction. Grant watched as numbers rolled downward, Arion's losses becoming Nova Shield's leverage. We didn't even touch the market today, he said. The panic's doing our work for us. Ariana gave a small nod. Fear is the best acquisition strategy. Ethan, joining via secure link, leaned back in his chair. You just dropped their valuation by 1/5 without spending a dime. She replied quietly, Justice doesn't always need capital. Sometimes it only needs truth in the right dosage. At Westvale headquarters in New York, Richard Westvale III was furious. He slammed the letter from his lawyers onto the conference table. Whoever leaked those files, find them. I want names. I want firings. His executives shifted uncomfortably, murmuring about optics and public relations. Thomas Gale, the lawyer who'd written the letter, spoke cautiously. Sir, pursuing her directly might backfire. She's positioned as a victim of discrimination. Public sentiment is Westvale cut him off. Public sentiment is weather. It passes. We'll sue her and her company for conspiracy if we have to. But, even as he spoke, his assistant slipped him a printed headline, Nova Shield CEO declines comment on Arion controversy shares. Rise 7%. He stared at it, jaw tightening. For the first time, the imbalance became visible. The woman he had dismissed as an inconvenience now carried the market's confidence. That night, at Nova Shield, Ariana stood at her office window as rain streaked the glass. The city's lights blurred like watercolor. Camille entered quietly. The media's everywhere. "Ma'am, they're calling you the face of corporate accountability." Ariana smiled faintly. "Let them call me whatever they need to feel better." Camille hesitated. "Are you worried they'll trace the leak back to us?" "No," Ariana said, still watching the rain. "Because we didn't leak it. The truth did." For a moment, she said nothing more. Then, quietly, "It's strange how quickly the powerful panic when the powerless stop explaining themselves." By week's end, Orion's stock had not recovered. Employees began whispering about layoffs. Flight attendants posted anonymous apologies online. Even Lydia Moss, the same woman who once questioned Ariana's seat, released a statement about rethinking her part in systemic culture. Ariana didn't comment. She didn't need to. The silence was eloquent enough. Inside Nova Shield's trading room, Grant approached her with an update. "We've crossed 33% ownership, counting our external partners." Ariana nodded. "Keep pushing. When fear clears, control will remain." Ethan's voice came through the speakerphone, amused but impressed. "You realize you're dismantling an empire with whispers." Ariana looked at the screen, a single stock chart curving downward like a confession. "No," she said. "I'm just showing them the mirror they've avoided for years." That night, she opened her personal journal, the only place she allowed to first-person thought. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate. "They told me to stay quiet. I did. But silence, when sharpened, cuts deeper than noise." She closed the book and set it aside. The city hummed below her, alive and unaware that balance was quietly being restored above it. The legal summons arrived on a Tuesday morning, precise, predictable, and entirely expected. Ariana Cole had always believed that powerful people rarely act from strength. They act from fear disguised as procedure. And procedure, she knew, could be weaponized both ways. The document bore the name Janelle Pierce, printed neatly under the title Senior Counsel, Nova Shield Legal Division. Pierce had joined Nova Shield 2 years earlier, a former federal prosecutor with the patience of a mathematician and the smile of someone who'd seen arrogance crumble up close. When Ariana read the opening line, she didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth moved slightly. It wasn't the letter itself, it was what the letter meant. Westvale Holdings had filed a cease-and-desist notice claiming coordinated defamation and interference with market integrity. They wanted silence. Janelle offered them the opposite. In the boardroom that afternoon, the air was still, deliberate. Ariana sat at the head of the table, Janelle on her right, Ethan and Grant across from her. The monitors behind them displayed charts, share movements, and the most recent poll results from public opinion trackers. "Westvale wants a courtroom," Janelle said, voice even, unhurried. "Let's give them one, but on our terms." Ariana raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we go public strategically." Janelle replied, "We file a civil suit for racial discrimination. Personal, not corporate. Your name against Orion Air. It keeps the story alive, keeps the pressure where it belongs." Ethan leaned forward. "Wouldn't that slow down the acquisition legal attention can attract regulators?" "Not if we manage timing," Janelle said. "We don't fight against the noise. We fight through it. The market follows narrative more than numbers. Ariana's gaze lingered on the digital stock chart. The Orion line was still falling steady, relentless. They want to bury this in legal mud, she said softly. We'll turn the mud into mirrors. By Friday, the lawsuit was filed in federal court. Ariana Cole versus Ariane Air and Westvale Holdings. Allegations of racial discrimination and systemic exclusion. The filing was factual, unemotional, surgical, no commentary, no press release, just the cold precision of truth documented in legal language. But the internet didn't need emotion to burn. Within hours, major outlets ran the story. CEO who exposed Orion bias files, federal discrimination suit. Talk shows reignited the debate. Pundits circled back to the leaked documents. The public rediscovered the video. And this time, the conversation wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It was about a seat at the table. Meanwhile, behind the quiet glass of Nova Shield's operations floor, another war was underway, one of numbers, not headlines. Grant and his team tracked market shifts minute by minute. Their screen showed a slow but certain takeover. 36%, Grant reported one morning, with the secondary funds included. We're within striking distance of board influence. Ethan nodded through the conference call. Public sympathy is doing half the work. Investors are panicking. They're dumping Orion stock faster than they can justify it. Janelle folded her arms. They underestimated what guilt costs on Wall Street. Outside the boardroom, the digital noise grew louder. Former passengers began sharing stories, some raw, some rehearsed, all familiar. A black business traveler posting from Chicago wrote, "They told me to move to economy because my seat was double booked. It wasn't. I just didn't look like a first-class flyer." Another from Atlanta posted a video of a similar experience. Then came a stream of emails, anonymous, apologetic, confessional. An Orion flight attendant wrote, "We were told to prioritize image. They never said race, but everyone knew what it meant. I'm sorry for my silence." Each message, each video, became its own small witness, the kind of testimony no court could manufacture or contain. Camille entered Ariana's office late one evening, her phone in hand. "You might want to see this," she said. It was a clip from a talk show. The host, a white woman in her 60s, spoke directly to the camera. Ariana Cole didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. And that's what frightens people who mistake calm for consent. The audience applauded softly, not the wild clapping of fandom, but the slow, steady rhythm of recognition. Ariana listened without expression. Then she turned back to her computer. "Every sound eventually fades," she said quietly, "but the data stays." Days turned into a strange dual rhythm. Court filings on one side, quiet market acquisition on the other. Two fronts, two languages, one purpose. Janelle managed the legal side like a conductor, disciplined, emotionless, deliberate. Every motion filed, every brief released, carried the same tone, measured indignation. Nothing for tabloids, everything for credibility. Meanwhile, Grant's financial team continued their silent advance, buying, consolidating, aligning smaller investors under new trusts. By early summer, Nova Shield and its silent allies held 42% of Ariane Air's voting stock. The legal storm had become their smokescreen. Inside Westvale Holdings, panic became policy. Executives rotated in and out of emergency meetings. One investor leaked an internal email from Richard Westvale himself. Our focus must remain on shareholder confidence. Do not engage with the media hysteria. Our reputation will recover. But reputation doesn't recover when truth keeps surfacing like debris from a wreck. At Nova Shield, the team gathered for their weekly update. Ethan joined remotely again, this time more relaxed. Public perceptions flipped. He said, 3 months ago, they called you a victim. Now they call you an architect. Ariana looked at him. They're both right. The difference is in who's telling the story. Janelle smiled slightly. We're not just winning a case. We're rewriting precedent that silence and strategy can coexist. Grant checked the latest ticker. Orion closed at its lowest price in 8 years. Ariana stood, collecting her papers. Then it's time for the next phase. Legal wins headlines. Ownership wins history. That night, alone in her office, Ariana sat by the window again, city lights flickering below, the courtroom filings, the market graphs, the public noise, all pieces of the same composition. In the reflection of the glass, she could almost see her mother's face again, calm, tired, proud. You don't teach them by shouting, her mother had once said. You teach them by becoming impossible to ignore. Ariana closed her laptop and whispered, They can threaten me in court, but they can't unlearn what they've seen. And somewhere, in the quiet of the night, both battles, the legal and the moral, tilted quietly toward her side. By early June, the temperature in the boardrooms of Westvale Holdings had changed. The press no longer waited for their statements. They waited for their mistakes. And the markets, the one audience that never forgives weakness, had started to smell fear. Behind glass walls in Midtown Manhattan, Richard Westvale III paced while his advisors whispered in low voices. The plan was desperate, but simple: sell Orion Air to a European conglomerate before the lawsuits and headlines turned toxic. Transfer the liability, pocket the exit, and vanish before anyone noticed the rot. Across the country, in the quiet precision of Nova Shield's data division, Ariana Cole was already watching. She had learned that power never announces its retreat. It slips away quietly unless someone locks the door. So she locked it. The discovery began with a mistake. A junior analyst at Nova Shield, while tracing Arion's maintenance expenditures, noticed irregular entries, discrepancies too consistent to be random. Invoices marked confidential operations, always approved by the same executive initials, R.W. 3. Grant brought it to Ariana's attention the next morning. Routine maintenance reports don't get sealed under executive privilege, he said, especially not for 3 consecutive fiscal years. Ariana didn't respond immediately. She leaned over the monitor, eyes narrowing. Pull the flight safety filings from the FAA archives, she said. Compare them against these numbers. When the files came in, the pattern sharpened like a knife. 3 unresolved engine failure incidents reported internally, but never disclosed to regulators. Each labeled pilot procedural anomaly instead of mechanical fault. Cover-ups disguised as clerical mistakes. Grant looked at her, almost hesitant. If this is real, it's criminal negligence. Ariana's expression didn't change. It's not just real, she said. It's leverage. The next day, she called an unscheduled meeting with Janelle Pierce and Ethan Ward. They met in the lower conference suite. No phones, no digital records, only paper and silence. Ethan skimmed the printouts. You're telling me they hid technical failures on commercial flights. Janelle adjusted her glasses. More than that. They falsified reports to delay grounding orders. If the FAA gets this, they'll freeze their operating license pending investigation." Ariana looked up. "Exactly, which means no European firm will touch them." Ethan leaned back, realization dawning. "You're not suing them anymore." "No," she said. "I'm saving them from escape." Janelle smiled faintly, admiring the precision. "You're about to turn regulatory oversight into a moral compass." Ariana didn't answer, but the faintest shadow of satisfaction crossed her face. Sometimes justice doesn't knock, it audits. The report was prepared that night, a meticulous, evidence-backed dossier formatted for one specific recipient, the Federal Aviation Administration, Office of Safety Investigations. Janelle drafted the cover letter. It was short, clinical, and devastating. To whom it may concern. We believe the enclosed materials suggest systematic underreporting of mechanical incidents by Orion Air and Westvale Holdings, potentially compromising passenger safety. We request immediate regulatory review. Nova Shield Compliance Division submitted in public interest. No signatures, no grandstanding, just facts, the truth, unbranded. At 7:14 Camille pressed send by noon. The first call came. A contact inside the FAA confirmed receipt. The phrase special investigation was used, the bureaucratic equivalent of pulling a fire alarm. Orion's pending sale to the European buyer froze instantly. Their due diligence teams went silent. By evening, financial news outlets were buzzing with speculation FAA opens inquiry into Orion Air's maintenance records deal with Euro Group delayed. The headlines multiplied like aftershocks. Orion's lawyers denied wrongdoing. Westvale's spokesperson insisted complete cooperation. But the market heard something else: risk. And risk has gravity. Within 48 hours, Orion's stock plunged another 22%. Trading halted twice in a single day, an automatic safeguard against collapse. The same investors who once toasted Westvale's brilliance now called it recklessness. At Nova Shield, Grant watched the screens in quiet awe. "We didn't even have to touch the stock this time," Ariana replied. "Truth is the only currency that devalues arrogance." Ethan joined via video, his voice low. "The European buyers officially withdrawn. They're calling it unresolved compliance risk." Ariana nodded once. "Then Orion stays exactly where we need it, cornered and unsellable. Across the ocean, in London, the Euro board met behind closed doors. One executive summed it up bluntly. "We don't buy into lawsuits and regulators. Let the Americans clean their own mess." Within hours, the acquisition was terminated. In New York, Richard Westvale received the news mid-meeting. He froze, eyes darting toward his CFO. They pulled out. "Yes, sir," came the hesitant reply. They cited the FAA probe. Westvale slammed his palm on the table. "Who leaked this?" No one answered. The room stayed silent, not from loyalty, but from calculation. Everyone in that room had already started updating their resumes. That night, Ariana stood in her office again, watching the city lights tremble across the bay. Camille entered quietly. "The FAA's gone public," she said. "They've announced a full investigation into Orion Air's safety practices." Ariana didn't move. "Good," she said softly. "Transparency's contagious." Camille hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever worry they'll come after you?" Legally, Ariana smiled faintly, her reflection calm against the window glass. "They can't sue someone for being right." She paused, then added, almost to herself. "I didn't set the fire. I just opened the window." 2 days later, a journalist from the Globe Tribune released an op-ed titled "The Quiet Revolution of Ariana Cole: How One Woman Turned Humiliation into Reform." It wasn't sentimental, it was analytical, a timeline of her restraint, strategy, and quiet precision. The article concluded with a single line that echoed across social feeds and evening news panels alike. "When truth is handled by calm hands, it burns cleaner." Public sentiment shifted, once again, not to outrage, but to respect. Ariana had become the embodiment of the thing Westvale feared most: moral authority backed by competence. 3 weeks later, the FAA released an interim report confirming significant discrepancies in Ariane's safety filings. Regulators began questioning board members. Flights were delayed, contracts froze. Ariane's brand, once a symbol of exclusivity, had become shorthand for hypocrisy. Inside Nova Shield, Ethan sent Ariana a short message. "They're grounded literally and figuratively." She replied with only 2 words: "As planned." The incident began in a place that, by now, felt like fate's favorite stage: the cabin of an Orion Air flight. Different route, different crew, same old altitude where civility and arrogance shared the same oxygen. It was a Thursday morning flight from Dallas to New York, one of the few Orion routes still running under observation status from the FAA. The company was struggling to project normalcy. Every flight felt like a test it couldn't afford to fail. In seat 3C sat Malcolm Reed, a tall, soft-spoken systems engineer, one of Nova Shield's contractors. He wasn't famous, powerful, or even known to most, but his name sat quietly in Ariana Cole's organizational chart, marked by a simple note, "Trustworthy," across the aisle. Victoria Hale, a marketing executive in a crisp beige suit, was already complaining about legroom air temperature and the idea that she might have to share an armrest with anyone at all. Malcolm didn't look up. He was reading a report, one of the last internal memos Janelle had sent about Orion's investigation timeline. His quietness, as usual, was mistaken for weakness. "Excuse me," Victoria said sharply. "You're in my space." He looked up, measured, polite. "I'm sorry, my armrest," she snapped, pushing against it. "You've taken both. And your bag, it's touching my jacket." He moved his bag immediately, voice even. "My apologies. That should have been the end, but arrogance rarely ends when it feels unseen." A few minutes later, as the plane began to taxi, she pressed the call button. The flight attendant approached. New uniform, new protocol, same old habit of assumption. "This passenger's making me uncomfortable," Victoria said loudly enough for several rows to hear. "He keeps bumping me. It's harassment." A hush fell over the nearby seats, that familiar pause of collective uncertainty. The same silence that had once swallowed Ariana Cole's voice months before, but this time, silence didn't mean surrender. A man in row 4 leaned forward. "Ma'am, I've been watching since we boarded. He hasn't moved once." A woman across the aisle added, "You've had both armrests since takeoff. We all saw it." Then another voice. "You're the one taking up 2 seats. Don't twist it." The shift was small at first, the weight of credibility tilting quietly, decisively. The flight attendant hesitated, looking at the passengers, then at Malcolm. He hadn't said a word. He met her gaze calm, steady, unflinching, the kind of stillness that carries gravity. "No problem here," he said simply. "Let's all stay comfortable." The attendant nodded awkwardly and retreated down the aisle. unsure what to do with the scene that had just inverted itself. Victoria huffed, adjusted her jacket, and turned toward the window. But her reflection in the glass showed something she didn't want to see. No one believed her anymore. Back in San Francisco, Ariana read the incident summary that came through Nova Shield's internal security feed the next morning. Camille had printed it out, adding a yellow sticky note. FAA monitor logged passenger dispute. Crew acted appropriately. No escalation. Ariana smiled, the first true one in weeks. "This time," she said softly. The system corrected itself. Grant, sitting across from her, raised an eyebrow. "You think it's coincidence, no?" she said. "It's evolution. Justice, once shown, doesn't unlearn itself." For Ariane Air, however, the timing couldn't have been worse. The video captured by a passenger 2 rows back had already gone viral. But, unlike the past, this time the narrative belonged to the quiet man. The clip was grainy, the sound imperfect, but the truth came through like sunlight through glass. It showed Victoria's accusation, the calm of the cabin, the chorus of witnesses speaking up, and Malcolm's composed restraint. The caption read simply, "The world's changed. We see now." Within hours, the footage reached every platform. News anchors replayed it with commentary that bordered on reverence. A moment of dignity. One anchor said, "Proof that calm strength can rewrite history." When Ethan Ward saw it, he forwarded the clip to Ariana with one line, "The ghost of Flight 2891 just got its redemption arc." She replied, "No ghosts, just lessons." Meanwhile, Orion's PR department scrambled to respond. They issued a statement within 24 hours, polished and predictable. "We are proud of our crew for maintaining professionalism and ensuring the comfort and safety of all passengers." But the public didn't buy it. People remembered the old Ariane, the one that escorted women like Ariana off planes for procedural verification. And they saw, in this new video, a mirror image of the same company, same uniforms, but a different ending. For once, the dignity belonged to the quiet one. A week later, Ariana invited Malcolm to her office. He arrived looking slightly uncomfortable in the sleek glass space, holding his cap in one hand. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said. "Just didn't want to make a scene." Ariana nodded. "That's exactly why it was." He looked puzzled. "You didn't defend yourself with anger," she said. "You defended yourself by being undeniable. That's what changes people." She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a single line written in her handwriting, "For staying silent the right way." He didn't open it then, just tucked it into his pocket, nodding in quiet understanding. That evening, as Ariana stood by the window, her constant vantage point over the city's restless light, she thought about how far the story had traveled. From one woman's humiliation on a plane to a man's calm defiance on another, from outrage to recognition, from silence as weakness to silence as truth. "We've all been passengers in someone else's judgment," she thought. "But one day, the world learns how to witness instead of accuse." On the other side of the country, in a small cafe in New York, Victoria Hale scrolled through the comments under the viral clip. The internet was cruel, but fair in its irony. Classic projection. Next time, try honesty instead of outrage. She turned off her phone, realizing too late that the story she tried to control had outgrown her. In the end, the FAA logged the incident as no fault, but the cultural ledger, the invisible one, recorded something far greater. For the first time, Orion's uniform represented change, not conformity, and in that still cabin, On that ordinary flight, the power dynamic that had once humiliated Ariana Cole was rewritten without her needing to lift a finger. The last weeks of summer carried a strange calm, the kind that comes before something breaks. Ariane Air still flew its planes, but half-empty cabins and muted announcements told the real story. Investors waited for the special shareholder meeting Westvale Holdings had promised a last-ditch effort to stabilize what was left of the empire. But for Ariana Cole, the meeting was not an ending. It was a stage, and she was already scripting the moment when the lights would shift. It began, quietly, with a knock on her office door. Camille entered, hesitant but steady. "Someone's here to see you," she said. "She says you'll remember her voice." A pause, then a voice, soft but nervous. "Then Cole, it's Lydia Moss." The room stilled. The same flight attendant who once questioned Ariana's right to sit in seat 2A now stood at the doorway, thinner, older somehow, carrying a folder that looked too heavy for its size. "Come in," Ariana said simply. Lydia approached the desk. "Avoid an eye contact." "I heard what's happening with Orion," she said. "They're trying to make me the scapegoat again. Said I failed to de-escalate the incident that started all this." Ariana watched her closely. "And I kept copies," Lydia whispered, "of everything." She placed the folder on the table, internal training slides, HR memos, and then, deeper inside, the real damage, a thread of private emails between Richard Westvale III and senior executives. The language was polite, even refined, but beneath the corporate phrasing ran a vein of quiet prejudice. Brand alignment with a premium demographic. We must preserve cabin atmosphere consistent with aspirational clientele. Perception of inclusivity should not compromise exclusivity. Every sentence was legal enough to hide behind, toxic enough to destroy reputations. Ariana turned a page, her expression unreadable. Lydia fidgeted. "I didn't know what they really meant until later." She said, "But you did." Ariana looked up. "Yes, I did." That evening, Ariana met with Ethan Ward and Janelle Pierce in the dim-lit strategy suite. The city outside pulsed in the glass like a distant heartbeat. Lydia sat quietly at the corner of the table, hands folded. Ethan skimmed the emails, his jaw tightening. "This is corporate racism written in code." Janelle nodded, every phrase carefully constructed for deniability, but string them together, and it's clear this wasn't bias, it was policy. Lydia spoke softly. "There's more. During training, they told us not to over-accommodate passengers who appear disruptive to the brand image. They didn't say it, but we all knew who that meant." Ariana turned to her. "You kept the recordings." Lydia hesitated, then nodded. 3 of them, audio and transcripts. Ethan let out a slow breath. "She just handed us the fuse." Ariana closed the folder. "Then all we need now," she said, "is the match." 2 days later, Ethan delivered it. He arrived unannounced, a flash drive in hand, eyes sharper than usual. "I think you'll want to see this," he said. The files were financial disclosures encrypted, buried within the donation network of a private PIAC. Inside, direct contributions from Westvale Holdings to 2 congressional oversight members, timed precisely around FAA regulatory reviews. "They paid for protection," Ethan said quietly, and not even creatively. Janelle read through the transactions, her legal mind already connecting the dots. "Bribery masked as lobbying," she said, "classic but fatal." "If we forward this to the federal investigators alongside Lydia's emails, They'll have no choice but to open a political corruption inquiry. Grant entered midway through, carrying fresh data press is already circling. Rumor says the shareholder meeting is being rushed up a week earlier. Ariana stood, looking out the window, the skyline painted in late summer amber. "Then we adjust," she said. "Everything goes live on the day of their meeting. No leaks before, no noise after. The truth belongs to the audience, not the preview." The preparation was meticulous. Janelle compiled the email evidence into a timeline, every coded word labeled, every discriminatory policy traced to its author. Ethan's financial data was cross-referenced with legal precedent, wrapped in airtight context. Lydia's recordings were cleaned, transcribed, and sealed with a notarized statement of authenticity. Camille oversaw security. Encrypted drop to the Federal Bureau of Investigations at 9:00 a.m. sharp, she said. Then public release at 9:30, synchronized across media outlets. Ariana only said, "Make sure the timestamps align. Truth loses power if it looks choreographed." The night before the meeting, Ariana stayed late alone, surrounded by silence and data. Outside, rain drummed softly against the glass. She looked at Lydia's email printouts again. The words felt colder in ink. Maintain aspirational perception. Balance inclusion with brand integrity. The kind of language that let prejudice survive board approval. She thought back to that first flight, the confusion, the stares, the forced escort down the aisle. The humiliation had been personal then. Now, it was structural, documented, archived, and ready to be dismantled. They thought silence meant surrender. She reflected. They never understood that silence was just the sound of focus. The next morning arrived like theater bright, polished, and oblivious at the Ariane Air Special Shareholders Meeting in New York. Richard Westvale III took the stage. Cameras flashed, investors murmured. He spoke in rehearsed calm. "We've faced challenges, yes, but our brand remains a beacon of integrity and innovation." He didn't know that, at that very moment, 3,000 miles away. The first email batch had been delivered to federal investigators by 9:32 a.m. The second batch, Lydia's recordings, hit the servers of 3 major news outlets. By 9:37, the PAC transactions went public, and by 9:40, the first headline lit up every screen in the building. Orion Air and Westvale Holdings, under federal investigation for racial discrimination and political corruption. The room erupted, phones ringing, whispers sharpening into panic. Westvale froze mid-sentence as assistants rushed the stage with printouts. In the crowd, investors turned toward each other, murmuring. "What did she do?" one asked. "She didn't do anything." Another said, "She revealed everything." Back in San Francisco, Ariana watched the live feed in silence. Grant and Janelle stood beside her. Ethan's voice came through the speakerphone. They just cut his mic. Ariana didn't smile. She just breathed steady, controlled. "This isn't revenge," she said quietly. "This is inventory." Camille looked at her. "Inventory." Ariana nodded. "Of truth. Every lie has an expiration date. Today, theirs just reached it." That afternoon, federal agents arrived at Westvale Holdings. The footage aired across networks by nightfall, men in suits entering marble lobbies, carrying sealed boxes. No one shouted. No one resisted. The system that once silenced others was now answering in whispers of its own. And in her office, under the pale light of evening, Ariana wrote a single line in her notebook, her private ritual of reflection. When you force the world to look at what it built, justice doesn't have to shout, it just has to show up. The ballroom of the Manhattan Grand was dressed for illusion marble floors, mirrored walls, and a stage framed by gold trim that pretended to belong to stability. Behind the podium stood Richard Westvale III, pale under the spotlight, his composure cracking in microscopic ways. He had rehearsed this moment for days. What he hadn't rehearsed was losing control of the story. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but hollow. "What we've witnessed in recent weeks is not a crusade for justice. It's a vendetta, an orchestrated attempt to weaponize identity and resentment to undermine this company's legacy." The crowd murmured a low, uncertain hum. Cameras flashed. Financial reporters lined the walls, waiting for spectacle. Westvale continued, pointing toward the back of the room where Ariana Cole sat among the shareholders, serene in a charcoal gray suit. He said her name like a challenge. "Ms. Cole has waged a campaign of deception. She calls it reform. I call it revenge." Ariana didn't move, not yet. The moderator tried to redirect, but Westvale was unraveling. "She hides behind morality," he said, his voice rising. "But her methods, leaks, manipulation, hostile acquisitions, they reek of hatred, not progress. She wants to dismantle Ariane, not rebuild it." It was the moment Ariana had anticipated. She rose slowly, motioning to the technical crew in the back. "Mr. Westvale," she said evenly, "I believe the shareholders deserve context." The lights dimmed slightly. The screen behind the stage came alive, a video montage of Ariane Air's internal communications, emails, board memos, policy drafts, each slide time-stamped and sourced, each one carrying the quiet poison of coded language. Westvale turned toward the screen, eyes widening as his own words appeared in the upper corner. "Ensure flight atmosphere remains aspirational. Avoid overrepresentation of lower-value demographics in premium seating." The room went still. Ariana spoke without raising her voice. "These are Mr. Westvale's own directives," she said. "The same directives that shaped company policy for nearly a decade. They didn't call it discrimination. They called it brand strategy." The next clip rolled Lydia Moss in a recorded interview, confirming the training procedures that discouraged attendants from accommodating passengers who challenged the brand image. Lydia's voice, calm but regretful, filled the hall. "I thought I was protecting the company. Turns out I was protecting a lie." Gasps echoed. A few shareholders glanced at each other, uneasy. Then came the slide Ethan had prepared the financial transfers. A chart appeared, mapping payments from Westvale Holdings to political PACs aligned with aviation committees. Each donation correlated to moments when Ariane avoided safety audits. Each dollar was dated. "This," Ariana said, "is not vengeance. It's arithmetic." Westvale stepped forward, anger cracking his voice. "This is theater," he said. "None of this has been verified by regulatory authorities." Ethan, standing by the media section, spoke up without waiting for permission. "It's already been verified," he said, "by the FBI, as of this morning." The words hit the room like an invisible wave. Ariana nodded once to confirm. Ariane Air is under federal investigation. The findings will be public record within 48 hours. A murmur swelled across the ballroom. Reporters typed furiously. For a man who built his empire on reputation, the sound of typing was the sound of collapse. Ariana approached the microphone, her tone steady, not triumphant, just precise. "I didn't come here to destroy a company," she said. "I came to rebuild one that stopped believing it could be fair. Orion doesn't need new branding. It needs new conscience." She gestured to the display. The next slide appeared her plan, titled Project Horizon, revised board structure, transparent hiring policies, mandatory inclusion audits, and, at the bottom, a single line in bold, "Culture is not an expense, it's infrastructure." For a long moment, no one spoke. The power in the room had shifted not through outrage, but through exhaustion. People were tired of defending what they knew was indefensible. When the vote finally began, it was almost anticlimactic. Each shareholder held a digital tablet, names glowing under columns of for and against. Ariana watched as numbers ticked upward. Her alliance with Ethan, bolstered by several independent funds that had lost faith in Westvale's leadership, held steady. 52%. The threshold crossed quietly, almost mercifully. The moderator cleared his throat. By majority vote, effective immediately, Mr. Richard Westvale III is removed as Chief Executive Officer of Orion Air. The room exhaled. Cameras clicked. Westvale didn't move at first, just stood there, staring at the tablet in disbelief. Then, slowly, he turned to face Ariana. "You think this makes you the hero," he said bitterly. "You've just killed a legacy." Ariana met his gaze. Legacies built on exclusion aren't worth saving. Security didn't escort him out. He left on his own. The sound of his footsteps faded down the marble corridor, a man walking out of his own empire, still trying to convince himself it was stolen from him. When the doors closed, the room stayed silent for a beat. Then someone started to clap quietly, respectfully. Not for victory, but for relief. Later that evening, as the city lights shimmered on the Hudson, Ariana stood in the empty hall. Camille approached, holding her coat. "It's over," she said softly. Ariana shook her head. "It's never over. It just changes form." Ethan joined them, his tone measured. "You realize you just became the new CEO of the company that once threw you off a plane." Ariana looked toward the window. "No," she said. "I became the CEO of the company that will never do that to anyone again." She turned back, voice almost a whisper. "They called it aspiration. I call it amnesia. It's time we remember who flies with us, everyone." Across the city, news anchors called it the most significant corporate power shift of the decade. Editorials described her as the woman who rewrote justice without raising her voice. But Ariana didn't read them. She went home, poured herself a cup of black coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, planes crossed the night sky, silver lines of movement, too high to carry pride, too fragile to carry hate. She thought about one seat 2A and how it had once defined humiliation. Now, it was just a number. Power, she realized, was never about the seat. It was about what you do when they take it away. The morning Ariana Cole officially became CEO of Orion Air, the city seemed quieter than usual, like the world had agreed to hold its breath. Reporters camped outside headquarters on Lexington Avenue, cameras pointed at the revolving glass doors, waiting for spectacle. But spectacle wasn't her language. Silence was. At precisely 9 Jury, Ariana arrived not in a limousine, but a black sedan with no emblem. She stepped out alone, carrying a single leather folder. Inside were not speeches, but plans, diagrams of culture, policy, and human repair. In the boardroom, the directors stood awkwardly. Some had voted for her, others against her, All of them were now, unmistakably, under her leadership. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile for the cameras. She simply said, "Let's get to work." The press conference was held an hour later in the same ballroom where Richard Westvale had fallen. The chandeliers glowed softly, as if trying to forget the shouting that once filled the room. Ariana stood behind the podium, dressed in a gray suit, her presence composed but firm. No teleprompter, no script. "Good morning," she began. "Today isn't about a change in leadership. It's about a change in language." The audience leaned in. For years, Ariane Air has spoken in phrases that sounded noble words like aspirational, exclusive, elite. She paused, letting the air settle, but when you look closer, you realize those words were used to tell people where they didn't belong. She glanced toward the first row, where Lydia Moss sat, the former flight attendant who once questioned Ariana's right to sit in seat 2A. Now, she was part of the executive training division. Their eyes met for a second acknowledgement, not triumph. "I'm not here to erase people," Ariana said. "We're not firing the past. We're firing the culture that made the past possible." The line hit like a quiet verdict. Reporters scribbled it down immediately, though few understood how deeply she meant it. Behind the scenes, reform began not with layoffs, but with questions. Every department head received the same memo. List every rule that exists only because of fear. Some sent pages, some sent none. All of them felt the shift in authority that no longer ruled by intimidation, but by clarity. She created an anonymous feedback channel, open to everyone from pilots to janitors. If something feels wrong, she said, "You don't report it up, you report it out." Truth doesn't need a chain of command. The platform flooded with submissions within days. Some were angry, some were raw, most were honest. Camille managed the intake. "They're not afraid anymore," she told Ariana. "Good," Ariana said. Fear was never a management strategy. It was a symptom. Meanwhile, the training division underwent its own quiet revolution. Lydia Moss, once terrified of being fired, now promoted to director of cabin ethics, stood before a new group of recruits. Her first words were simple. "Before you learn service, you'll learn respect." She played the old training tapes, the ones filled with coded instructions about brand image and passenger perception. Then she shut them off halfway through. "That," she said, "is who we were, not who we are." Her voice didn't shake. She'd spent too long rehearsing apologies. Now, she was teaching prevention. In her office later, Ariana watched a recording of Lydia's first session. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer edits, just whispered to herself, "This is what rebuilding sounds like." Ethan Ward visited the headquarters a week later. He stood in her office doorway, holding a cup of coffee. "You've done what no one thought possible," he said. "You turned revenge into policy." Ariana smiled faintly. Revenge burns fast. Policy lasts longer. He raised his cup, to endurance, then to clarity. She corrected softly. Across the country, reactions were mixed. Some media outlets called her reforms corporate idealism. Others called it strategic rebranding. But within the industry, something subtle began to happen. Flight attendants from other airlines rode in, asking for Orion's new ethics manual, copying from the best. One CEO admitted anonymously, Ariana didn't celebrate. She annotated. Inside the company, resistance lingered. A handful of senior managers whispered that her inclusivity agenda would alienate luxury clientele. Ariana didn't argue. She invited them into a room, handed each one a list of the company's most frequent passengers over the last 5 years. "Do you see a pattern?" she asked. They studied it, confused at first, then uneasy. The data spoke for itself. 78% of premium revenue came not from exclusivity, but from loyalty. People came back when they were treated with dignity. She leaned back. "Luxury," she said, "isn't about exclusion, it's about assurance." No one disagreed after that. By the second month, the transformation had become visible. Cabin crews greeted passengers differently. The scripted smiles were gone, replaced by genuine ease. Complaints dropped. Repeat bookings rose. The internal surveys showed something no spreadsheet had ever captured before employees felt proud again. Grant presented the numbers to Ariana one morning. "Morale's up, service scores up, even our investors are calmer." Ariana studied the report, then looked out the window. "Dignity scales better than profit," she said quietly. Grant nodded. "You've made that your brand." "No," she corrected. "I've made that our habit." In her first internal broadcast to all staff, Ariana spoke directly into the camera. No polish, no filters. "I was once told I didn't belong in seat 2A, she said. "Now I sit here to make sure no one else hears those words again. Not in this company, not in this industry." She didn't promise perfection. She promised accountability. That speech would later be replayed at business schools as an example of moral leadership in modern corporate culture. But at that moment, it wasn't for history. It was for her people, the ones still afraid to speak, the ones learning how, late one night, long after everyone had left. Ariana walked through the empty hangar. The planes, lined in perfect symmetry, reflected soft light across the floor. Each one bore the Orion emblem still intact, but awaiting change. She touched the cold metal of one wing and murmured, "We'll fly differently this time." In the distance, a single maintenance worker raised a hand in greeting. She nodded back. That simple exchange, no words, just recognition, carried more progress than any policy memo. The next morning, she called a meeting with her design team. "We're changing the logo," she said, "but not yet. First, we'll earn it." They didn't ask what she meant. They understood symbolism follows integrity, never leads it. By the end of her first quarter as CEO, Ariana had not fired a single person, but she had replaced an entire belief system. The media called it the quiet revolution of the skies. Lydia called it something simpler: decency, reintroduced. And when Ariana returned to her office that night, she found a small note on her desk unsigned, typed in all caps, "Thank you for letting me be proud to wear this uniform again." She folded the note carefully, placing it in the same folder that once held the documents of her humiliation. This one, she kept on top. Revenge ends the story, she thought. Restoration begins the next. 4 months into Ariana Cole's leadership, Orion Air looked the same from the outside, same planes, same logo, same skyline headquarters, but inside, everything had changed. There were fewer secrets now, fewer locked doors, and, for the first time in company history, fewer whispers in hallways. The first step had been cooperation. Under Ariana's direction, Orion submitted every internal record requested by federal investigators, no delays, no redactions. It was a calculated risk. Most corporations negotiate visibility like a bargaining chip. Ariana treated it like an act of hygiene. "We don't clean what we hide." She'd told her board, "We clean what we expose." The investigators came and went in quiet waves. Agents from the Federal Aviation Administration, the Securities and Exchange Commission, even a small unit from the Department of Justice all walked through the same corridors once ruled by fear. No one obstructed them. Some employees even brought coffee. What they found wasn't subtle. Buried in years of financial records was a network of ghost contracts, maintenance deals, consultant invoices, shell accounts all funneling money back to Richard Westvale's private holding companies. It had been going on for nearly a decade. When the findings were made public, it was no longer a scandal. It was anatomy, the anatomy of arrogance. Ariana read the report at her desk late one night. She wasn't surprised. Ethan stood nearby, scanning the summary. "They'll want a civil settlement," he said. "They'll need someone to blame." Ariana didn't look up. "Then we'll give them accountability, not theater." She ordered conditional compensation payouts to victims of past discrimination and unfair terminations, but linked to a system of verified reform. Every dollar came with an action reemployment offers, training access, or structural policy change. It wasn't charity, it was restitution with purpose. The media called it reparative governance. Ariana called it common sense. Janelle Pierce coordinated the legal communications. "The agencies are impressed," she said in a briefing. "They're used to pushback. We gave them participation." Grant nodded, tapping a spreadsheet. "Markets reacting too. Stocks up 12% since the report went public. Transparency is the new currency." Ethan smiled faintly. "You're turning honesty into a business model." Ariana closed her notebook. That's all it ever should have been. Public opinion shifted gradually. The same audience that once watched her humiliation now spoke her name with quiet respect. Cable news stopped using the phrase racial scandal and replaced it with corporate renewal. Articles ran with headlines like "The Woman Who Saved an Airline by Owning Its Sins." From Seat 2A to the CEO's Office, The Flight Path of Dignity. Ariana didn't read them. She preferred numbers to adjectives. Inside Ariane's hangars, work felt different. Mechanics noticed new safety protocols. Ones that had been optional for years suddenly mattered again. Pilots found open communication lines that didn't punish them for honesty. Flight attendants spoke freely about passenger issues without fear of reprisal. Lydia Moss oversaw training sessions that focused less on etiquette and more on empathy. She'd replaced the old service motto, "Protect the brand," with a new one printed on every manual, "Protect the passenger." One morning, Ariana stopped by during a session. Lydia was explaining a concept called the invisible seat, the idea that every person on board, no matter where they sit, carries the same right to dignity. Ariana stood in the back, unseen, listening. This is how power changes shape, she thought. Not through headlines, but through habits. Meanwhile, the finance department uncovered the depth of Westvale's embezzlement. Lewis Grant compiled the data, a decade of shell vendors and inflated contracts. He built a private runway out of public trust, Grant said. "Can we recover it?" Ariana asked. "Most of it," he replied. "The rest will take time, maybe years." She nodded. "Then we'll start with what's real. Integrity compounds better than interest." When federal investigators released their joint report, the tone surprised everyone. It didn't read like an indictment. It read like a transformation case study under new leadership. Orion Air has demonstrated an unprecedented level of corporate transparency and cooperation. The company's willingness to confront systemic bias and financial misconduct represents a model for restorative reform within the private sector. It wasn't vindication. It was confirmation, the quiet kind that doesn't trend but endures. The same week, Ariana appeared before the Senate Transportation Committee. Her testimony was short, stripped of rhetoric. "We didn't fix a company," she said. "We corrected its memory. Systems don't discriminate, people do, but systems can learn what people forget." The hearing ended early. Even the senators had nothing left to argue. Back in San Francisco, the company's data dashboards told the story better than any speech. Customer satisfaction up 27%, employee retention highest in a decade, stock value climbing steadily, month after month, and for the first time in its 42-year history, Ariane Air was profitable without creative accounting. But what impressed Ariana most wasn't financial. It was human. One evening, as she walked through the terminal before a red-eye flight, she saw a janitor stop to help a passenger with her luggage. No cameras, no supervisors, just instinct. The kind of quiet decency that once got people ignored was now what defined the company. She thought, "This is the dividend they'll never measure." Ethan visited her office the next day with an update. "Press wants an interview," he said. "They're calling you the Justice CEO." Ariana looked up from her papers. "Justice isn't a title. It's maintenance." He chuckled. "You realize you've made humility the new PR strategy?" "Right. Maybe," she said. "Or maybe people are just tired of arrogance." Later, during a leadership retreat, Ariana addressed her senior team. "I know what some of you are thinking," she said, "that this is about forgiveness. It's not. It's about functionality. When a system works for everyone, no one has to beg for fairness." She paused, scanning the room. "Redemption isn't free," she added, "but it pays well." By the end of the quarter, Ariane Air's transformation was being studied by universities. Business students debated whether Ariana's approach was moral innovation or pragmatic reform. She ignored both arguments because for her, it was never theory, it was repair. And when she boarded one of her company's flights, seat 2A, by quiet irony, the attendant smiled naturally. Without protocol, "Welcome aboard. Ms. Cole," she said, "no tension, no overcorrection, just warmth." Ariana smiled back. "Thank you. It feels good to be home." As the plane lifted, the city lights blurred beneath her, all the noise, the headlines, the judgments fading into distance. Up here, silence wasn't emptiness, it was peace earned honestly. 6 months after the storm, Ariane Air no longer existed. The name, once synonymous with exclusivity and scandal, had been retired quietly, deliberately like a uniform that no longer fit the world it came from. The new name was Horizon Air Systems. It was chosen after weeks of debate. Branding agencies suggested words like Unity and Phoenix, but Ariana Cole refused all of them. "Rebirth isn't about rising," she said. "It's about expanding the view." Hence, Horizon, a name that looked forward, not upward, a name that included everyone who could see the sky. The unveiling happened on a crisp autumn morning at the company's largest hangar outside San Francisco. Reporters, employees, and former critics stood together as the first aircraft freshly painted, sunlit silver rolled out with its new insignia, a soft gradient arc, stretching endlessly. Ariana stood before it, hands folded behind her back, saying nothing at first. Cameras clicked, then she spoke. just loud enough for the room to hear. "Today, we stop flying toward profit," she said. "We start flying toward people." It wasn't a slogan, it was a line of direction. The New Horizon identity went deeper than paint and fabric. Every policy, from hiring to cabin design, had been rewritten under the same principle. Visibility is equality. Pilots, engineers, mechanics, attendants all underwent the same retraining cycle. There were no exceptions. The old hierarchy of front versus back dissolved. Uniforms were redesigned to look unified functional, not ornamental. The fabric was lighter, the colors warmer, the posture easier. The first time the crew lined up in their new attire, even the skeptics felt something shift. It wasn't just an airline changing its look, it was an industry adjusting its conscience. At the center of this cultural rebuild stood Lydia Moss, the same woman who, a year earlier, had doubted Ariana's right to sit in Seat 2A. Now, she led Horizon's new equity and empathy training program, an initiative the media described as emotional aviation engineering. She started every session the same way. Your job isn't to serve passengers. Your job is to remind them they matter. Some trainees rolled their eyes at first until they heard her story. When she told them about the day she had misjudged Ariana Cole and the lesson that followed, the room always fell silent. "I was trained to protect the brand," she said, "but no one told me the brand was a person." Her transformation became the heartbeat of Horizon's reform. And, in a way, Ariana had always intended that. She told her executive team early on, "We don't erase mistakes. We promote the people who learned from them." Ethan Ward watched the New Horizon unfold like a man who'd seen both the worst and best of the same world. During a board meeting, he pointed to a report showing increased applications for cabin crew and flight academy positions among young people of color. "You realize what this means," he said. "You're rebuilding trust that's been broken for generations." Ariana's reply was measured. "We're not rebuilding trust, we're building entry," and she meant it. Weeks later, Horizon announced the creation of the Horizon Fellowship, a scholarship and mentorship program for young Black and minority students aspiring to careers in aviation. Each year, 20 fellows would receive full training and placement within Horizon's operational divisions from piloting to aerospace engineering. The company wouldn't just hire inclusively, it would cultivate equality at its roots. The fellowship's slogan was simple: "The sky belongs to everyone who's ever looked up." The announcement received national attention. Morning shows praised it as a model for corporate restitution done right. For many Americans who had once sworn to boycott Ariane, Horizon's emergence became proof that redemption, when done through humility, could actually last. Yet Ariana stayed distant from praise. She avoided interviews, skipped award ceremonies, and rejected invitations to industry galas. When Camille asked her why, she replied, "Public approval is a weather pattern. What matters is flight stability." Camille smiled softly. "You sound like a pilot now." Ariana looked out the office window toward a departing plane. "Maybe I finally learned how to stay airborne," she said, in private. She kept close watch on data, not profits, but outcomes. 4 months after launch, employee retention was at a 10-year high. Complaints were at a record low, and the FAA had publicly commended Horizon for its unprecedented commitment to equity in aviation. But the numbers told only part of the truth. The real measure lived in subtler places in the tone of voices greeting passengers. In the confidence of young recruits speaking up during training. In the way employees stopped looking over their shoulders before saying what they believed. Lydia's program expanded beyond flight crews to include administrative staff and executives. She insisted that everyone from accountants to air traffic coordinators attend. When one senior VP objected, saying he was too busy, Ariana sent a handwritten note. If you're too busy to learn empathy, you're too busy to lead. He showed up the next morning. The rebrand culminated in a live-streamed broadcast, a simple, unembellished message from Ariana, filmed in one of the hangars. No teleprompter, no applause. Horizon Air Systems, she said, is not a new name for an old company. It's a promise that what we learned in pain will carry in principle. We can't undo what was done, but we can choose what happens next. The video lasted 2 minutes. It was shared over 10 million times. Months later, the first Horizon Fellows began training in partnership with the National Aviation Academy. Among them was Marcus Ward, Ethan's 19-year-old son, the same child who, years earlier, had been denied a first-class seat because of dress code violations. On his first day, Lydia met him at the entrance. "Your father sent you here," she said. "Your mother's lesson built this place." He smiled, lifting his pilot's logbook. "Then, I guess it's my turn to fly, right?" In an interview with a small local newspaper, the only one she agreed to Ariana was asked what the name Horizon meant to her personally. She paused before answering. "When you're on a plane," she said, "the horizon never gets closer. It moves with you. It's not a destination. It's a reminder to keep looking forward." The journalist wrote that line down, thinking it was a metaphor, but Ariana had meant it literally. Later that night, she walked through the company's new museum exhibit, a timeline of its transformation. At the center was an empty first-class seat, enclosed in glass. Below it, a plaque read "Seat 2A, the moment everything changed." Ariana stood before it for a long time, expression unreadable. Finally, she whispered so quietly even she barely heard it. "I guess the view was worth the fall." It was a gray morning over New York, the kind of morning that didn't ask for attention. Fog wrapped itself around the city's skyline, muffling sound, softening light. Inside JFK Terminal C, a woman stood by Gate 47, boarding pass in hand. Ariana Cole. The ticket read Flight 2891, New York to San Francisco. Same route, same gate, same number, different world. She didn't request this flight. She just found herself drawn to it the way one returns to the scene of an old scar. Not to reopen it, but to confirm that it's healed. The gate attendant recognized her instantly. "Good morning, Ms. Cole. Welcome back." Ariana smiled. "Thank you. It's been a while." She boarded quietly. No entourage, no cameras, just her, a carry-on, and a calm that had taken a lifetime to earn. Seat 2A was waiting for her, the same seat where humiliation had once begun, where a story of insult had become an architecture of change. She sat down and exhaled slowly. The leather was new, the stitching tighter. The armrest bore the new Horizon Air Systems emblem, the rising arc she'd chosen months ago. Passengers settled around her, a family, a business traveler, a young couple whispering about their honeymoon. No one stared. No one questioned her right to be there. The intercom crackled softly. "Good morning, passengers. This is your captain speaking. My name is Captain Naomi Lewis, and I'll be flying you to San Francisco this morning." Ariana paused. The voice was warm, confident, measured, young, and, unmistakably, A black woman's voice. For a second, she closed her eyes. The symmetry of it hit her quietly, like sunlight through fog. The same company that once denied her a seat now placed a woman like Naomi in the cockpit, not as an exception, but as proof of evolution. As the plane taxied, Ariana looked out the window. Runway lines blurred beneath her. The engine's hum carried a tone she hadn't heard before, not mechanical, but human. She thought of Lydia Moss, the woman who once called security on her. How Lydia had transformed humiliation into a lifetime of service. How she'd trained a generation to replace judgment with care. Lydia's last message had come just yesterday. A package will be waiting in your seat pocket. It said, "A small one? From me." Ariana reached into the seat pocket now. There it was, an envelope, cream-colored, folded neatly with Horizon's insignia in the corner. She hesitated before opening it. Then, slowly, she unfolded the letter. "Dear Ms. Cole, I used to think mistakes ended stories. You showed me they can begin them. You could have ended my career that day. Instead, you gave it meaning. Because of you, I learned that redemption isn't given, it's earned, and it's never too late to start paying for it. Every flight I train now begins with your story. Not the scandal, not the shame the moment you chose silence over anger, the moment you made the sky wide enough for all of us. Thank you for turning my failure into a runway. With respect, Lydia Moss." Ariana read it twice, once with her eyes, once with her memory. No tears. Just that familiar, steady warmth that comes when the world quietly balances itself. She folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the pocket. Outside, the engines roared. The plane began its ascent. At 12,000 feet, the clouds broke open to light. The city disappeared behind them, and for a moment, everything below was soft and unimportant. Ariana thought of all the names that had carried her here. Ethan, who turned outrage into partnership. Janelle, who translated justice into structure. Grant, who made ethics measurable. Camille, who turned whispers into communication. And Lydia, who'd carried the hardest lesson of all, to forgive herself. They weren't heroes. They were participants in an awakening, one that started in humiliation and ended in harmony. This is what justice looks like, Ariana thought. It doesn't shout, it breathes. A soft chime signaled the seatbelt light turning off. The crew moved through the aisle, efficient, calm, equal. One of the attendants, a young Latina woman with a poised smile, leaned toward Ariana. "Ms. Cole, Captain Lewis asked me to tell you she's honored to have you on board today." Ariana's smile deepened. "The honor's mine," she said. As the attendant walked away, Ariana looked toward the cockpit door. For a fleeting second, she saw her younger self, the woman who once stood trembling as guards escorted her off a flight. That woman was gone now. Not erased, but integrated part of the architecture that built this quiet triumph. The plane leveled out over the Midwest. Below, rivers twisted like silver threads through patchwork land. Ariana pressed her hand lightly to the window, a simple gesture of connection. She remembered the day of the incident, the humiliation, the restraint, the vow she'd made not to respond with rage. Back then, she couldn't have imagined this a future where the same skies held her victory without bitterness. Her mind whispered something she'd once told Ethan: revenge burns fast. Policy lasts longer. Now, she added, silently, and grace lasts longest of all. Hours later, as the aircraft began its descent into San Francisco, the captain's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Horizon Air Systems, welcome home." The words landed differently this time, not as routine, but as truth, as passengers gathered their belongings. Ariana lingered. When the aisle cleared, she stood, smoothing her jacket, and turned to look at seat 2A one last time. The leather caught the afternoon light the color of resilience. She whispered, almost to herself, "We finally made it." Then she stepped into the aisle and walked toward the exit, letter in hand. At the cockpit, Captain Naomi Lewis waited tall, poised, wearing the New Horizon insignia on her uniform. "Ms. Cole," she said, "I grew up hearing about you. I applied to the fellowship because of what you did." Ariana smiled gently. "No, Captain, you're flying because of what you did. I just cleared the runway." They shook hands. A brief, steady moment, a passing of sky between generations. Outside, the California sun met her face as she descended the steps. The tarmac smelled of jet fuel and salt. She paused halfway down and looked up at the plane, at the horizon stretching far and clean. Somewhere inside her, the story that began in humiliation found its ending not in triumph, but in symmetry. Justice hadn't been shouted. It had taken flight. Ariana smiled, soft and private, the kind of smile that doesn't seek an audience. And as the engines cooled behind her, the world for once felt level. The story of Ariana Cole was never about an airplane seat. It was about altitude, not the kind measured in feet or miles, but in character. Most people remembered the video a woman of color escorted off a plane, a crowd silent, a system complicit. They called it the seat incident. But the truth, the one that history would remember, was quieter than outrage. It began with humiliation and ended with reconstruction. Somewhere between those 2 points, Ariana had chosen something the world rarely chooses anymore: restraint. Years later, people would say she won. They'd call her the woman who bought the airline that tried to shame her. But if you asked her, she'd tell you she didn't win anything. She simply rebuilt what had broken. Justice, in her eyes, was never about punishment. It was about correction. When she walked back into that boardroom, when she reorganized the flight policies, when she renamed the company Horizon Air Systems, it wasn't vengeance, it was repair. Ariana understood something most powerful people forget. You don't fix a system by burning it down. You fix it by teaching it why it failed. Under her leadership, those who once hid behind excuses faced accountability. Those who'd been silenced found voice, and those who'd made mistakes, like Lydia Moss, were given the rarest second chance to do better, not to vanish. Ariana had every right to destroy them. Instead, she gave them purpose. Lydia became the cornerstone of a new culture, training crews on empathy. Ethan Ward, the witness who captured her humiliation, became a partner in reform. Janelle Pierce rewrote corporate law from within, proving that morality and management could coexist. And young Captain Naomi Lewis, the pilot who flew Ariana home, became the symbol of what the next generation could be when the ceiling finally lifted. Sometimes, late at night, Ariana would revisit the old files, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. On her desk sat a single object from the Orion era, a gold-embossed tag that once read "First Class Only." She kept it not for pride, but for memory, the kind that humbles, not haunts. "I don't need to erase it," she once told Camille. "It reminds me how low we can fly when we forget who built the wings." The world around her moved on. Horizon Air Systems became a model for ethical enterprise. Other corporations studied its structure, its transparency policies, its fellowship for minority pilots. Politicians quoted her in speeches. Universities used her case study in business ethics. But Ariana didn't give interviews. She preferred to stay behind the quiet machinery of progress, the system she'd re-engineered to make fairness routine. As she once said, when justice works, it shouldn't make headlines. It should make habits. Years later, someone asked her during a closed leadership forum what she thought justice really was. She paused before answering. Justice, she said, isn't about getting even. It's about building a world where no one else has to. It was the kind of answer that didn't trend, but stayed the kind people remember when they're quiet enough to listen. For those who followed her story, the narrative felt like a reversal of power. A woman once humiliated in public had become the one who decided who stayed, who left, who led. But for Ariana, it wasn't reversal, it was restoration. Power wasn't the goal, balance was. The men who'd laughed at her that day, the captain, the security officers, the executives at Westvale Holdings had all faded from public life. Some resigned, others were quietly replaced. Their names dissolved into the footnotes of consequence, and yet Ariana never spoke ill of them. When asked about Richard Westvale III, she simply said, "Some people crash because they never learned to land." Inside Horizon's headquarters, a plaque hung in the lobby. It didn't show Ariana's face. It didn't mention the incident. It read, "Justice is not a performance, it's a process." Visitors stopped to read it, often surprised by how ordinary it sounded until they realized that was the point. Justice wasn't supposed to be extraordinary. It was supposed to be normal. The Horizon Fellowship continued to grow. By its 5th year, it had produced over 60 licensed pilots, engineers, and aviation managers, most of them first-generation college graduates. Among them was Marcus Ward, who would go on to design a safety algorithm that saved countless flights. In one ceremony, he thanked Ariana publicly, saying, "You turned turbulence into lift." She only smiled and replied, "You were the lift." There's a certain kind of peace that comes when the world stops needing your anger. Ariana lived in that peace now. No bitterness, no spectacle, just a quiet belief that integrity, when practiced long enough, becomes its own form of rebellion. If there was one truth that remained after everything, it was this: power doesn't corrupt everyone. Sometimes it reveals the ones who were never meant to hold it. And justice, the real kind, doesn't scream from podiums. It's written into policy, sealed in fairness, and handed to the next generation without fanfare. Ariana had rewritten not just a company, but the unspoken rule that some people belong and others don't. She made belonging procedural. In her final public address, she summed it all up. It wasn't broadcast, but those who were there remembered every word. "I was once told," she began, "that dignity is earned by status, but I've learned that status means nothing without dignity. They took my seat, so I built a place where no one else would lose theirs." She looked at the audience, her employees, her critics, her allies. "Justice isn't revenge," she said. "It's reconstruction." And then, almost as an afterthought, "Suffering teaches us what's broken, but grace teaches us how to build something better." When the applause faded, she walked off stage and disappeared into her work once more, a quiet woman who had changed the altitude of fairness without ever shouting once. Somewhere, a plane crossed the evening sky. Its tail bore the horizon emblem, a soft arc stretching forward, endless. The voice of Captain Naomi Lewis came through the radio, calling in a clear path for landing. Below, a generation moved a little closer to the world Ariana had imagined, one where worth wasn't checked at the gate. And, in the stillness that followed, the story finally closed its circle. True strength isn't the power to strike back, it's the grace to lift everyone higher. Ariana Cole's story is more than just a stunning reversal of power. It's a testament to a new kind of justice. Silent justice, no screaming, no pounding on tables, no retaliation. She responded to insult with intelligence and reformed a system that had rejected her. From being dragged out of her seat, Ariana bought the airline, reimagined a culture of fairness, and rewrote the rules of flying for a generation. The wrongdoer was eliminated. The wrongdoer was given a chance to make things right, and justice quietly reborn. The lesson for all of us: calmness is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength, when you're wise enough not to let anger dictate justice. If a woman who has been humiliated can turn her pain into an opportunity to make the world more just, then you can turn your hurt into the beginning of something better. Remember, true justice lies not in revenge, but in the ability to make the whole world fly higher. Thank you for watching the story to the end. If you believe that dignity can change the whole system, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to spread more humane stories where justice does not need to be noisy, but still makes the whole world listen.